Hey everybody, welcome back. Well, Bitcoin decided to go flat on the day, which is a rarity, and we have a lot to go over there, especially with what's going on with MSTR and some of the news that came out today. Came out late Friday night, and it looks like it's finally having a toll on it, so we're going to get into that as well. I think it's important for us to start. We're just looking at the weekly charts, and you can see how we're boxed in here. We have a huge week. We have a lot of names to talk about, obviously, and what's going on out there, and we're going to dive into this in some pretty decent detail. But if we can just see right here, we did make that higher high, right, from Friday, which is kind of a big deal considering all things out there right now and everything that we're facing. NQ as well. And what did this really was some data out of China that was better than expected and some news out of Japan that was worse than expected. Reminder that the 10-year is definitely something you're going to want to watch tomorrow, 10-year Treasury, because we have to deal with Japan tonight around 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time and what they're going to do to rates. That could have a dramatic effect on the market, especially ahead of the Fed, because it's something that's just not factored in. So these are the things that we have to be aware of, and these are the things that could move the market clearly. But there were some moves out there today that we should talk about. For example, SMCI absolutely broke down. We actually talked about this in Saturday's video a little bit, and you can just start seeing how it's rolling straight here. And if we just mark off that level, we can just see really where you're heading, probably that 909, 910 level. Put in the simplest of moving averages. Let's drop in the 12 here. We'll make that white since we're now going to a dark background, right? And you can see that slice and dice right through. Put that 22 there, and here's the 55. Drop the 200, but that's kind of pointless because we're not near it. So now you can see that we're just sitting on the 22, and that's important. I use a 12, a 22, and a 55. But I do think that it's very important to understand this is going in the S&P, and you're slicing like that. So you have this little mountain here where it had to make a decision, and boy, it made one. So this was a pretty easy short today, quite frankly, once it started to roll and we broke that level. If we just go to a bear chart and get all that stuff off of it, and you'll be able to see this really clearly. Left shoulder, head, right shoulder. Necklines don't always need to be straight, just FYI. That's a perfect example, one that did not need to be. And then when it cracked, it was a really super simple short for us to just get involved and to just ride the name down. It's exactly what we did, and we did quite well with the short. It's actually one of the better trades I had today. So I think that this is really important to watch because this is a leading name right now. Now, you have other leading names as well that we're going to talk about, such as NVIDIA. And yeah, you're going to bounce all around. And people say, well, why is it up? Why is it down? Look, you have conferences going on and you have expectations going on. I think the most important thing for us to look at today with NVIDIA is just say, are we starting to see the development of a high? I don't know, but we're certainly getting to a level where we have a seller. And I think we should just denote that level before we get into some of these other details. And what I mean by that is just, let's just see where that level is. And here we are. And it's that 1920 level. And we could see that very clearly what's going on here. Here, watch this as we highlight that whole area. So anytime we've been in this range, we've been having issues. And that's definitely something that we're going to want to watch. And it's certainly something that we're going to want to pay attention to. 870 like clockwork, it's been holding. So you get to that 870 and you're down here and that's been holding. We actually had a decent trade off that today. Now, just for our purposes, we can see right here, this is when we went out there at like 119, and you could see not the worst place to try it, trimmed off the 870 bounce. And that was right in that area. And this is exactly what you're seeing. You're seeing supports tested. They're either breaking or they're not breaking. If they're not breaking, they're great spots to get involved. If they are, it's an issue. And we saw that with SMCI, so the exact opposite action. But did we really go anywhere today? I always say it's important to show these. I'm going to show another one of a MSTR short that we did. But if you take a look at these areas in here, it's really important to just denote these. It's more important to denote support and resistance levels when you're in a consolidation phase because you don't know what's going to happen. So you're always just trying to get what you can out of this, hit singles, and then move out of the way. There's some names out there that are breaking out, and I will go through a couple of them. One sector in particular I think is interesting. One we already covered this week. But the question is now I'm going to clean all this off, and we're just going to dive right into this. You can see our area in here. You can see how this is setting up, right? And I think that's really important because you have this conference going on, so you have pretty decent expectations. You have the 870, and you've been hitting those higher lows. But at the same time, that 920 is going to be an issue. So we're boxing ourselves in here. And as we're boxing ourselves in the leading names, we have to pay attention and we have to say, what does that mean? And then we come here and take a look at the stocks. And this is where it gets interesting because the rest of the names are not doing so great. So here's the SOX. And if we take a look at this hourly close, which I think is very important to look at the last hour of the day. Remember, we used to look at an indicator, which we'll start looking again very shortly. I believe here it's going to start being what I think is of use again. Last hour indicator, which tells us what the institutions are really doing. They usually move last hour of the day. But if you take a look at the SOX on the last hour, when was the last time we had a close like that? And I think that's really important. It's the lowest hourly close we've had on the SOX in March. That means something, especially considering what we're dealing with right now going into NVIDIA. So as I was talking to one gentleman today, and he's like, well, why is NVIDIA down on this conference? And the question is, what do we know that no one else knows? And quite frankly, nothing. So there's no real reason for it to rally just because it's having a conference. Everybody knows that. But we're not seeing these other names hold up. We are seeing a lot of the nonsense. And what I mean by the nonsense is we're seeing a lot of the spikes where they're trying to lure you in. And that's what you need to be cognizant of. So in other words, if we take a look at this long bar down on Friday on ARM, which we all know has selling pressure, or could have selling pressure, and you watch these breakouts, and we watch these breakouts fail, like this one failed, that's the kind of nonsense we have to pay attention to, because that's telling you we're setting you up. Psst, we're setting you up. Because everyone's out there using the 9. That's me telling you with the psst that they're setting you up. Because you're flipping your VWAP, so you're going to get all the people that play the VWAP flip, right? Then you're going to get all the people that play the 9 EMA flip. So you've lured them into their death, right? Essentially. Now they're waiting. Oh, surely we're going to go higher because there's the higher high. They all jump in. Forms a doji. Dojis are what? Signs of uncertainty. And what's it do, right? It just matumbos down, and then there you are buying up here, and now you're down $8. These are the games that are going on right now. It is very important when you're in a consolidation phase to honor your stops more than any other time. And the reason for that is because you're hitting singles, and if you're giving up home runs, it's going to be a really, really rough ride. A really rough ride. It doesn't matter the name. One of the names I thought for sure with the action that was going on was MicroStrategies, and we should talk about that. Now, after hours, MicroStrategies started trading back up to that 1800 level after this huge run. This huge push that took out about 100 points in a very short period of time appears to be the tail end of this short seller that got squeezed. Now, this short seller went out there and shorted MicroStrategies and went long Bitcoin, which is not the worst idea in the world. I'm going to leave this up so you can see the link, and the link's right here so that you can watch it. But Bitcoin crash triggered by failed $1 billion hedge fund spread trade. So Bitcoin price crashed from over 72 to 65, and it's because they unwound this trade. And the trade is really simple. You're just going long Bitcoin and you're shorting the underlying asset. Now this makes sense, and you can see right here, apparently a fund blew out a $1 billion trade, MSTR, BTC spread, which is why BTC dumped and the MSTR premium went to the highs. And basically, what's interesting about this, P&L pocketed by base sailor we put back into Bitcoin. This doesn't really make a lot of sense that people think that this is what happened, because sailor doesn't get the money. It doesn't work that way. So it's kind of funny that they're thinking that. But what we're seeing here at the end of the day is we're seeing this blowout. And then they just start talking about the trade, and they start finding out that the analyst talking about what happened. And the dip was because a fund blew up on their MicroStrategies Bitcoin short. A hedge fund set up a spread trade ETF before the ETF approval. Long Bitcoin short MSTR was the deal. The fall through when the ETF with Bitcoin rises. It does make a lot of sense because you have MicroStrategies that's essentially trading at 125,000 Bitcoin, right? And then Bitcoin's nowhere near that. And so when you start walking through that, it makes sense to do this trade. This is supposedly the hedge fund, outlined the contrarian strategy, but nonetheless, it didn't work. And so now that doesn't work, they unwind. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Once they blow up, or that trade blows up and they're forced to unwind, that's when the trade usually works. So what I mean by that is I saw that buying, and I actually came in long and then wound up spending the early part of the day, just getting out of the long and obviously losing money on that trade. The thing that was interesting is it was dropping more than Bitcoin was dropping, which is very rare. In other words, Bitcoin was down 1%, and I'm dropping down 3-4%. I'm literally slicing through levels. And everybody knows if you play this thing, it doesn't matter how many shares, but you have a $20 spread over 1 minute. It's kind of crazy how fast it will move. And you can even see here, 722 to 1635. I mean, you're down 100 points in 5 minutes. It doesn't even take that long, frankly. So what we started to see was massive pressure. And then as we started to look into the articles and find out the unwinding, and once that unwinding is there, That's all you need to see. And next thing all you're doing is you're just looking for a level. This is a really important concept, and for time's sake, I'm just going to walk you through it. So we watched the bond auction. I'd strongly recommend, if you ever listen to the pre-market live streams that we do every morning at 8:30, don't laugh, we try to start at 8:30. Actually, we try to start at 8:15, but who's guessing? Anyway, we're sitting here at this 11:30 bond auction. You always want to watch how the market acts on these, especially when you're going into geopolitical events or macro events as you are this evening, right? Going into Japan, Bank of Japan, 11 p.m. tonight, as we stated earlier. But now you have BTC names are rallying. Now, go take a look at Mara. Go take a look at CLSK. Go take a look at Coin. Mara and CLSK in particular, they were rallying even though Bitcoin was dropping, right? But MSTR could not get its legs. Now, why is that? This is a really simple concept to understand. If you are short, okay, and you have to cover because your spread trade's not working, right? If you are short and you have to cover, then you have to go out there and buy stock. If you buy stock, that stock's going to go up. After you're done covering up here, right, and that was your buy, after you're done covering, what happens? There's no buyers. Okay, so the actual spread between Bitcoin and MicroStrategy starts to fill. That's what makes it an excellent short now. It's not that they were wrong. The market can remain irrational longer than you can remain solvent. Doesn't matter if these guys have billions of dollars. They always seem to forget that you have to have the trade on position sized accordingly so that you can leave it on. They went for the jugular and essentially it didn't work. The jugular got them. So that's an awful analogy, but you get it. So then what we started to see was I went out there and I started buying these puts, and it's somewhere in here that we were talking about it. But what got me about the puts, here I am. I didn't want to put it out as an alert. This was just SMCI. We made 100% on the short and the puts today. And then I closed it like 997 to make sure I show it. I'm not trying to hide anything. Anyway, here we are, 12 o'clock, and you can see MicroStrategy, 1600s, 1500 puts. So I paid like 112 for the 1600s and 72 for the 15s. And then I don't put these out as alerts on this name. This is what I'm doing. If you're not a big boy, no other way to say it, you can't handle these swings and 20% spreads on options, do not touch this. Like if you're a novice, just forget MicroStrategies exists because it's not an easy name to trade. It's very, very difficult. So once you see that, okay, I saw that. Now this is what I was talking about. You drop 30 points. 1500s hardly moved. 30 points and the options hardly moved. But we started to see some weakening going in there. We started seeing the longs that are moving. They were really MSOS. The Adobe's getting some love. Energy's getting some loves. So we're starting to see where they're going and the names that are moving. TPL was one that we've gone over ad nauseum. We're in the Alpha Chasers community. We're up about 100 points there. Took 40 points for me to break even on the 15s. 16s are doing better. But that was crazy. And then what I'm stating ahead of time, if you're doing these, is you have to pull out, we talk about this a lot, positive slippage. So when you have an option like this, and this is a very important concept, when you have an option like this, right, and that option is just standing stagnant like that, and the stock is plummeting, okay, and you're expecting the option to be down here, but it's still up here, you have to get out while it's plummeting. You can't wait for it to set up and confirm. You have to get out while it's plummeting because the spread's too great. And that's exactly what we did here. Trimmed, but the MSTR RSI was 7 on the 1 minute. So there you are at 1257. And then you can see MicroStrategy's trimmed at 200. But what you're looking for is this 1257, and we're looking at the RSI. Now, why do I look at the RSI? This is really a very important concept for people to get. And I know a lot of people are like, well, I don't like RSI. Well, don't use it. That's fine. I would suggest that you take a look at it. I have found it extremely helpful. When you're down here and you have a 7 RSI and you understand that RSI is charting the magnitude of the move, well, this told you exactly where the bottom on the chart was. You don't have to look at it, but I'll continue to use it because it tells me things like this. And people will say, well, that's after the fact. And that's exactly why I just showed you where we got out, right? This is telling me very clearly that I have an issue, and that's probably the end of it. Okay, the divergences are real. You might not like it, you might not believe in it, but they work. So I would strongly suggest that you utilize these. Now, what happens tomorrow with this position, that remains to be seen. But this is definitely something that I want to look at. And it's certainly something that I want to pay attention to. I don't think that this is over by a long shot. One last thing on that. There is no reason whatsoever for that stock to be trading at that huge premium to that. None. Zero. Zip. Okay. In the comments, I always read your comments. And someone said, it doesn't matter what the cost of things are because consumers are just going to pay for it. Consumers are running out of money. This is in the Financial Times. U.S. consumers are starting to pull back on spending. Retail sales reach a plateau, while company executives see disposable income squeezed, okay? And this is what we're starting to see. There is a line here. This is off Financial Times, and this is interesting. Dollar Tree's fastest growing customer demographic earns more than $125,000 a year. You're earning $125,000 a year and you're going to the Dollar Tree store. Okay? That's where we're at right now in this country. So when you think about that, and you can see this article, and the reason that I put this out there is so that people can understand what's really happening. When you see CPI and PPI the way that they are, the PPI from last week, you can see retail sales beginning to level off. This is a really good article. And you can just Google it yourself right here. Just put this in the headlines and you'll be able to read it. They have it out for free. But what it's really hammering home, and the point that I really want to hammer home is when PPI keeps going and the CPI is going where it's going, they always try to pass the cost on to us. They will always try to pass the cost of retail sales on to us. But when you start seeing PPI move faster, please listen to this. When PPI moves faster than CPI, that means they're unable to push the cost to us. So I was talking to someone in the comments about this on YouTube yesterday. Please leave comments. I do answer them all, and I do try to respond to them all. So the reason for that is because I want to keep it as a community so we can discuss ideas. Speaking of that, if you're on the wait list, letters did go out tonight for some of the people that are on the wait list, so you might want to check, and then a new batch will go out next week. But if you take a look at this, this is what I'm talking about. When PPI goes higher than CPI, this becomes a problem. But again, we'll see what this week has to bring, and there's a lot of other moving parts that are going on out there right now. Now, I would just like to do a little simple math here, and what we're going to see is just why these people were shorting MicroStrategies, and quite frankly, in my opinion, I get it. I think they were right in what they were doing with the short, but I think it's really more important to understand where they're going with it. So if you look at MicroStrategies right now, you have a $25 billion market cap, all right? And $14 billion of that is roughly Bitcoin. So what you're doing is you're saying Bitcoin is 14 billion. How are you getting there? 205,000 Bitcoin, times it by 70. I'm being generous. Bitcoin at the time of filming this is like 67, 68. But we'll do 70, make the math simple. Company value. I took shares outstanding, right, to come up with the disparity, the market cap. But we'll get there. So the company value, how am I coming up with what the company, meaning he's got a company here and it does 100 million in rev. Sometimes it makes money or he writes off the losses of Bitcoin, etc. To figure out what the company is worth, you come here and you say, okay, the stock value forever was roughly no higher than 140, 150. We won't even use an average. We'll take the high of years before he ever bought Bitcoin. And then we'll put 10% growth on it over 2 years. That gives you roughly a $2.1 billion company. Back envelope, look at it. You take the company value, take the Bitcoin, you figure out the math, it gives you roughly $9 billion. You take $9 billion and you divide it by the amount of shares that are outstanding, okay? And you can see that this thing could drop by, if you're going to value it, you could drop by a third from where you're at right now. That's why these guys were shorting it, because it makes so much sense. But irrationality, I'll throw this over here. Irrationality doesn't matter. If people want to own it because they know that you're going to get squeezed, they're just going to squeeze you. And now this is where it gets interesting, because that's when you want to do the trade. After this guy that understands this and understood all the methodology, after he gets blown out, that's when you want to do the trade. That's when the trade makes the most sense. From our standpoint, this is when you want to start saying, hey, do I want to be short? Now, if I overlay this with a 3 and a 5 and an 8, and here, let me clean this up a little bit here and just show you this, and it is MicroStrategies. You see it up here. And we can see the break here, and we can see the rip from the 700 and how we've gone here. How many times have we closed below the 5-day moving average? The green is the 5, the green is the 3, the yellow is the 5, and the 8 is red, right? Green, yellow, red, just like a stop sign, or not a stop sign, but a light, and just reverse it, right? That's why you always want to make sure that when they're reversed and the way that they're set up, it's go or stop, right? Hopefully you understand that, but that's why I'm color-coded that way. Anyway, how long have you been below the 5-day since we've been ripping? I'm glad you asked. When did it start? Monday, 10:30. Since then, this is it. How long have you been below the 8-day since we've been ripping? You haven't. All right. So since then, you haven't had any of this. Now look at this. You can't stay above the 3, can't stay above the 5, can't stay above the 8. Okay. So you can see a major shift in MicroStrategies. Does this mean it's just going to automatically plummet? No. But now that short is setting up to work. And I think that that's a really important to understand. I showed some of the trades that we did with it. It is not easy to make money shorting this name. And as I said earlier, hopefully you laughed when I said, unless you're a big boy, don't do it, because the spreads are like 20% on the options. And so you have to be able and willing to handle this, and you have to know how to size accordingly. One other thing that's really pertinent for us to go over, and you should have noticed this today. In front of you are 40 different sectors. I keep a sector chart, and what we're looking for is where's the money going. MJ is where the money is going. Solar names are getting a lift. Utilities are getting a lift. These vegan names are getting a lift, which is kind of interesting. Retail's getting a lift, and oil is getting a lift. Some of the steel names as well were today. But this is telling you where the money's going. And I think that's very important for us to understand that this MSOS trade, we talked about this on Saturday, we are seeing a lift there. TAN, I'm not really sure which name is actually pushing there, but it's certainly something for us to pay attention to. Now, I will finish with this because I think that this is on everybody's mind with NVIDIA. And why is NVIDIA going higher? Well, everybody that is in NVIDIA knows the same thing that we all know, right? We all know the same thing, that this conference is now. So the conference is not really going to add anything. You can see that you're down $15. The money is having the list. You can go to their website and you can get this list. The money's in having this list, okay? You can see how Root is trading up ahead of this. You're up $10 tonight on Root. SUN, you can see how that is bouncing around too. And so what you're seeing is you're seeing some interest in these names, and that's how I would look at it as well. One final thought. Goldman did come out today, and they did say that they are lowering their estimates on Tesla. Now, I understand that they raised their European prices, right? But their market is China, and they lowered it because of China. Look at what the stock did on a downgrade of price at the largest investment bank in the world, or the most prestigious investment bank in the world, Goldman. Formed a hammer on the hourly. Let's clean it off. I actually shorted this and did well with it today. Just wasn't around for this. But forms a hammer on an hourly, flips the hammer, and just builds. Okay, you're going to want to watch this because tomorrow, despite everything out there that's going on, the downgrade on price point, the downgrade of earnings, maybe this has been leaked. Maybe everyone's been short ahead of this, and now that the news is out there looking to cover. But this is setting up. This is a major reversal on really negative news. That's it.